2000, Nancy Campbell-Panitz, a 52-year-old single mother from Sarasota, Florida, found herself at the center of a shocking and ultimately tragic incident that would draw national attention. The events unfold on The Jerry Springer Show, a television program notorious for turning personal disputes and chaotic relationships into public spectacles. Nancy's appearance, however, was not meant to be a spectacle. It was meant to be a chance for reconciliation. She was hoping that this appearance would offer a chance to mend her relationship with her ex-husband, Ralph Panitz, but little did she know it would be the catalyst for her fatal end. Ralph and Nancy had divorced in 1999, after 15 months of marriage, ending their tumultuous marriage after years of conflict, including frequent fights and even threats of violence. However, despite their divorce, the couple remained in close contact, and their relationship was anything but clean. Nancy, who had a deep, unwavering hope for reconciliation, believed that The Jerry Springer Show would be an opportunity to reunite with Ralph and put their troubled past behind them. According to Nancy's son, Jeffrey Campbell, his mother had been led to believe that the show was offering a way for her to reconnect with Ralph, who had been living in Germany. Nancy believed that Ralph had been deported to Germany, but there's no official record confirming he was deported. He was originally from Germany, and this belief was based on what Nancy was allegedly told. Jeffrey recalled, "My mother believed that Ralph had been deported to Germany. She thought the show would bring him back to America and that they would reconcile. She thought he was coming back to tell his new wife, Eleanor, that he wanted to be with her." Nancy was hopeful, and the producers of the show played on this, capitalizing on her emotional state. But the reality of the situation was far different from what Nancy had expected. In the months before the episode, Ralph had married Eleanor, and the producers had an entirely different plan for the episode. Rather than facilitating a reunion between Nancy and Ralph, the show was set up to create a dramatic confrontation between the three of them: Nancy, Ralph, and his new wife, Eleanor. They wanted a messy confrontation, full of conflict and emotional turmoil, to air in front of a live studio audience. In May 2000, when Nancy arrived at the studio, she was greeted with the familiar chaotic environment of The Jerry Springer Show. The set was designed for confrontations, not reconciliation. But Nancy, who was never comfortable with being in the spotlight, was uneasy about what was about to unfold. Jeffrey recalled that his mother didn't like being photographed and had always avoided attention, so seeing her in such a public setting was difficult. He said, "To see her up there on stage looking like a deer caught in the headlights. I just wish I could go back and say, 'Don't do it.'" The episode quickly turned hostile. Instead of the reunion Nancy had hoped for, she was publicly humiliated. The audience, encouraged by the producers, jeered as Ralph and Eleanor taunted Nancy, who stood there, bewildered and hurt. Eleanor, mocking Nancy, said, "I want you to leave us alone. I want a normal life." The audience's laughter echoed, and Nancy's discomfort became palpable. Realizing that this wasn't a moment of healing, but one of exploitation, Nancy made the difficult decision to walk off the stage. Nancy later said, "I thought I could handle it, but as the show went on, I realized it wasn't what I thought it would be. I walked off because I knew I couldn't stay." Her exit was met with applause from the audience, further deepening her sense of humiliation. After a few weeks, the episode aired. Nancy, who had already experienced a sense of betrayal from the producers, had no idea that the very broadcast of the show would seal her fate. Little did she know that hours after the episode aired, her life would come to a tragic and brutal end. At around 6 p.m., just hours after The Jerry Springer Show aired, Ralph arrived at Nancy's home in Sarasota, Florida. Although the couple had divorced, they continued to have a volatile and unhealthy relationship. Just days earlier, Nancy had gone to court to file a restraining order against Ralph, citing his frequent violent tendencies. She had spoken out about the abuse she suffered during their marriage and had warned the authorities that Ralph was becoming increasingly aggressive. Nancy had described Ralph's violent behavior in great detail when she spoke to a judge. She had testified, "He's frequently violent. He threatened to take my life and my family's life. He told me how he would torture me and my family." Despite the restraining order, Ralph showed no restraint. His rage, ignited by the public humiliation of the Jerry Springer episode, led him to take a tragic and irreversible step. Ralph entered Nancy's home and, in a violent outburst, began to beat and strangle her. As he launched his brutal attack, Nancy's neighbor Greg Miles overheard shouting from behind the house. He described hearing Eleanor pleading with Ralph, saying, "Ralph, please don't do this." Eleanor's voice, filled with distress, echoed through the night. At 7:30 p.m., a second neighbor discovered Nancy's body lying lifeless on her kitchen floor. Ralph and Eleanor had vanished by then, and Nancy was pronounced deceased at the scene. The police immediately launched an investigation, but the case was shrouded in mystery. Ralph and Eleanor were nowhere to be found, and the scene at Nancy's home was chilling. There were no signs of forced entry or struggle beyond the violent assault. The police turned their attention to the recent Jerry Springer Show episode, and it soon became clear that Nancy's public humiliation was directly linked to her end. The authorities later learned that Ralph had been watching the episode at a local bar, where he was reportedly incensed by the way he and his new wife were portrayed. The investigators believed that this humiliation was the catalyst for Ralph's violent outburst, and that he went to Nancy's home with the intent to hurt her. As the investigation continued, Nancy's son Jeffrey became increasingly vocal about the role that the Jerry Springer Show played in his mother's demise. He was adamant that the producers had manipulated Nancy, taking advantage of her vulnerability for the sake of ratings. Jeffrey said, "They manipulated my mom. She didn't even know what she was getting into. They exploited her, and she paid the price." The public scrutiny of the show grew as the investigation unfolded. The media picked up on the connection between the crime and the Jerry Springer episode, and the ethical questions surrounding reality television became the focal point. Did the producers of the show create a dangerous environment for their guests? Was their pursuit of ratings more important than the safety and well-being of those involved? These questions would haunt the producers, the network, and the public long after Nancy's demise. Ralph Panitz was eventually apprehended and charged with second-degree slaying. He was found guilty in May 2002 and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Circuit Judge Nancy Donnellan, in her sentencing, spoke harshly about the role of the show's producers in Nancy's end. She asked, "Are ratings more important than the dignity of human life?" Holding up a photograph of Nancy's battered face, she addressed Ralph through a camera, ensuring that he saw the full extent of the damage he had caused. She said, "This is how she lost her life." Then she sentences him to life in prison. The case brought attention to the darker side of reality television. Shows like The Jerry Springer Show had built their fame on exploiting personal conflicts and sensationalizing intimate, often painful situations for entertainment purposes. Nancy's tragic end served as a grim reminder of the psychological and emotional toll these programs could have on their participants. In the years that followed, Jeffrey Campbell continued to speak out about the damage done by reality television. He argued that these shows, rather than helping people, often led to further trauma, manipulation, and, in some cases, violence. His mother's end became a rallying cry for those who wanted to see greater responsibility and accountability in the entertainment industry. He said, "They treated my mom like a pawn. She was just a person to them, a character to be humiliated for ratings." While The Jerry Springer Show and others like it may have faded from the airwaves, the lessons learned from Nancy's story remain critical in understanding the ethical responsibilities of the entertainment industry.